Development. This will be the objectives and strategies as adopted by last year's business plan. As you know, we've got an updated one in front of council right now with some alterations to the strategy level, but for now we'll look at these, and then the next time we come back together in April, we will have the new strategies. All right, speaking of objective and strategy here, we're going to roll through these one by one, so we won't linger here. Likewise with the overall metrics, these are as adopted in the business plan. All right, objective 1, create and implement aggressive neighborhood revitalization plans. All right, strategy A, I think that turns it over to Jeffrey Williams.
It does. Good morning, Mayor, everyone. Jeffrey Williams, City Planning and Development. Strategy A really looks at our need to update our city's overall comprehensive plan focus. Focus was adopted in 1997. We have not been standing still since then. We put emphasis on updating the city's all individual 18 area plans. Last year, we completed updating all 18 of those plans, and we're actually now starting that new 10-year cycle to update those area plans. So the Greater Downtown Area Plans is one of those plans that we are currently updating. We'll get started in Hickman Mills in a couple of months updating that plan. All this really to set the stage to look at our comprehensive plan, and you're seeing on the screen the documents that will help build the foundation of that comprehensive plan. Again, that is the plan that talks about future land use and development for the entirety of the city and looks really at citywide issues as it relates to community growth and development. But it's very important as we wait to start that effort, which will start next year. We're looking at some of those foundational documents, the Community Health Improvement Plan, that's what the CHIP is, the AFFH, Affirmatively Furthering the Fair Housing Plan. Those are documents we'll use as guides and foundation for the comprehensive plan, along with policies we've adopted, our transit-oriented development process. We adopted last year our housing policy that was presented last month. Soon coming is the final version of Bike KC, of the city's bike plan. So all those documents will be the foundation that will build a comprehensive plan upon. Advanced KC as well, I don't want to forget that, the city's economic development strategy. But ultimately, we are looking at a new comprehensive plan to make sure that we look at Kansas City from the perspective of not only growing out the city, but understanding its importance as being the center of the metropolitan area and making sure our future growth and development choices will help clearly cement that role and really will be a catalyst for growth throughout the entire Kansas City metro.
So, Jeff, I know throughout some of the other plans we've had public input. Will there be opportunity for a comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Input sessions?
Thanks, Julie. And I think two things that we will work on as we get ourselves ready to launch the plan. First is public awareness and building our public engagement skills. As we build area plans, we do lots of outreach through steering committees, technical committees, survey work. Actually, Kate Bender and I will be meeting later this month to talk about what pre-survey week work we can do with the community prior to launching the effort to see what things they want to see within that plan. So that's a part of it. And the other part, I think, is just awareness and education of all those foundational documents that are currently out there so that when we get ready, we have a knowing and engaged citizenry as we move forward with hopefully a whole bunch of unique public engagement processes and techniques. So that'll get us off to the best start, spending time now to really make people aware of the need to put the plan together and get their input about how it should be structured.
Great. All right, area plan implementation.
Okay. And again, as I mentioned earlier, talking about the area plans, the city is divided up into 18 different planning areas, and the next map shows the city, and what you have highlighted are those areas where we have active implementation committees. We put together steering committees to draft the plan, and that's anywhere from a 12 to 24-month process. But once the plan's drafted, an implementation committee remains, and they work on putting in place the recommendations that are within the area plan. So the areas you see highlighted are those areas where we have plans newly adopted and we have implementation committees. The lifespan of implementation committee usually is anywhere from 2 to 3 years post the adoption of the plan. There are certain areas like downtown where it's just a kind of a continuous implementation committee, and we sometimes rely on other entities and organizations to be that continuous implementation committee. So a variety of different strategies, objectives. You're seeing on the screen there all the different work and some of the outcomes of those implementation committees. It's everything from helping to get zoning overlays adopted to those committees being catalysts for receiving grant dollars to do other types of planning, infrastructure planning, again, study about future growth and development. So they're critical, and we feel that we've done our best job when we've got communities excited about talking about the future, have the conversation, have a plan, and the community helps us to start launching some of those implementation measures. So after that 2 to 3 year period, we hope we've worked with enough of the existing community network and infrastructure that they can take on implementing those recommendations outside of an implementation committee.
All right, that takes us to objective 3. And actually, before we do that, housekeeping thing I did not do. Alyssa is listening. All right, would you like to introduce our guests?
We are blessed to have Cheryl with us today.
From where?
Cheryl is with from New Zealand. She is a visiting city manager from New Zealand.
Oh, good.
Welcome.
Oh, hi.
All right, objective 3, targeting development throughout the city. Strategies here kind of span a couple of different objectives, so we're going to talk about them at the same time. So objective 1, objective 3, both strategy Cs about targeting our initiatives. So this one is about catalytic urban redevelopment. I think, James, can you speak, or Jeff? Okay.
Yeah, KCStat is an initiative started since 2015, looking to work in neighborhoods on the east side, really to have a kind of a unified approach for redevelopment. KCStat is looking at everything for educational opportunities to neighborhood reinvestment. You're seeing on the screen the corridors and the areas in which they are working. I'll drop all the way down to the bottom, the Wendell Phillips community, and the purpose-built community model, and it's looking at developing and redeveloping communities in a way we like to see all communities developed in an environment that offers housing opportunities at a variety of different price points, but also really understanding the importance of having a robust educational opportunities and environment. And I know down in Wendell Phillips, they've recently announced working with Brinshaw Development to do some housing and rebuilding within communities. So CURE has really been at the table. They brought together a nice coalition of other stakeholders as well, working Mid-America Regional Council, with LISC, with ULI. I think what the idea really is to engage stakeholders to help identify existing community assets and resources, and then to see how they can best gain and leverage some outside dollars. But I think really all built around the idea of community, the combination and the relationship between housing, quality of life, education, and then really trying to work with local stakeholder groups to help build their capacity as they help to rebuild communities. So Diane Cleaver heads up that effort, and I see her and her group at a lot of different tables here as we're talking about not only physical development, even topics such as economic mobility.
Right, opportunity zones?
Yeah, so the opportunity zones haven't changed much since March, when we submitted, I think, 27 census tracts. We've put together 5 opportunity zones that you'll see on the right. Blue Valley Industrial, Paseo Gateway, Central City, and Swope Park. And then I think pretty recently they added Martin City. In terms of it being a tax shelter to invest unrealized capital gains, nothing has been released by the U.S. Department of Treasury yet, but we're expecting it any moment now, so we'd have a better idea of what kind of investment we can work with and how we can strategically place that in the opportunity zones.
So since there's no guidelines, then there's nobody saying that they want to invest.
That's correct.
And you may be expecting those guidelines any minute, but my guess is that's going to take an FBI I'm sorry. I've got my opportunities confused. What makes you think they're going to that these guidelines are going to come down quickly?
That was relayed to me by someone on the city staff, but yeah, that's
Okay.
I would imagine they're in contact with the Missouri Department of Economic Development. That's what they told me.
Well, is it the Missouri Department of Economic Development that we're waiting for, or the U.S. Treasury Department?
U.S. Treasury, and then DED acts as a conduit.
Yeah, okay. It's kind of like infrastructure. I see it being worked on right now.
There has been some conversation. Bob, you might want to elaborate on So, because there's a lot of these opportunity zones nationally, setting aside the whole issue of when the feds actually get it implemented, there's been some conversations between us and EDC, and I think maybe Bob could elaborate about potentially pre-approving incentive packages to layer on top of it, just to further distinguish our opportunity zones from the other thousands of opportunity zones that are out there. So,
Yeah, I think we're just eternally optimistic that the Treasury will come out with the regulations. But Troy's correct. We have been working with some different groups because I think what's going to happen is there will be a lot more opportunity zones maybe and a lot more. Yes, and so trying to pre-develop portfolios that would be attractive to draw that capital into a series of different investment opportunities is one of the things that we are starting to work on, just so when the rules do come out, we're ready with portfolios to start trying to attract the capital into the area.
I should add, too, that we've had a kind of a new partner, and somebody we're excited about is the Kauffman Foundation has stepped up and has said they will help us prepare promotional materials for these opportunity zones and are paying for the expense associated with that. So again,
Yeah.
That's somebody we haven't
We
usually
just met with them last week.
Right. So I think
to
that's
start
a
that.
good opportunity for us to see how that partnership expands going forward.
All right, shared success?
Yeah, so currently we're implementing the shared success with City Finance and Jackson County, and then maybe the Northland counties, but it doesn't affect them as much. Essentially, with the passage of 160383, we dedicated our property taxes to go into the shared success fund, basically establishing a minimum 25% pilot on incentivized projects within certain census tracts. Julie, if you go to the next slide, kind of gives us more meat. We worked with the EDC to kind of begin to outline what kind of funds we can expect in the Shared Success Fund. I just want to reiterate, there are no funds in the Shared Success Fund at this moment.
There's no shared success
And there's no
organization.
Shared Success Fund yet either.
It's a name only.
It's a name only at the moment, yeah. Working with EDC staff, by the end of 2018, we can expect about $30,000 based on 3 projects that are coming online: River Market West, Ambassador Hotel, and McGow Gordon. And then we have some community benefit agreement payments that could possibly be coming into the fund as well. But there are a lot of policy questions open to the Shared Success Fund, how we're going to distribute the funds, what we're going to use it for.
I think that's a job for the Finance Committee.
Sure.
So the size of the funds will probably give us a better idea of answering some of those questions as well.
Yeah, James, maybe in layman's terms, can you tell us what this can be used for and what the ultimate outcomes of shared success once there is revenue in there?
Yeah, so I think the idea was that it would be a gap fill for commercial development in historically distressed census tracts.
I don't think that's what was intended for Shared Success Fund. Do you? I don't think that was what it was intended at all. Which is why I think this needs to go to the Finance Committee.
You make a great point, Mr. Mayor. Maybe.
But that's not my understanding of what was intended for this fund initially. Was it yours?
No, I mean, I think the discussion was to be able to provide gap financing opportunities in areas that needed that gap financing to make their projects go forward.
I thought it was for housing.
Well, that could
Oh,
be.
that's Love Thy Neighbor.
Right. That's Love Thy Neighbor, but
So it could be, it wasn't exclusively for commercial projects. It could be used for housing.
right, because the
which
Love
is
Thy
heavy,
Neighbor was
right.
more of a minor home repair kind of program for those who were having issues.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Sorry. I got my,
Finance Committee came through again, Mr. Mayor.
yes. It's because somebody was brilliant enough to appoint a decent chair of the committee.
I think more than decent, but your point is well taken.
All right, go ahead if all the laughter hasn't intimidated you.
I think hopefully when the revenues come through and the fund exists, we'll have more answers to our questions.
But this does bring up a point. This fund has been discussed. I don't know, what documents do we have that describe its purpose and structure? Do we have any? Was this just something that we did without an
We have a
ordinance?
council ordinance. That's
I think we need to
Right.
probably revisit that ordinance and make sure that it is what we think it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it somewhat got co-opted, maybe as too strong of a term, but in the discussion of incentives and you know, a couple of years ago related to that ordinance that was primarily about incentives, then this kind of got subsumed into that
Right.
discussion, but there was really no structure placed to it afterwards, and it kind of became a footnote, and that's just my editorial opinion more than anything. We talk a lot about it and that it's there and what it's supposed to do, but I think this discussion kind of proves that there's no there yet. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk and figure it out. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, James.
Well, I actually had a document outlining its purpose, and then I contacted the city clerk and said, had this been passed by council, and checked with city legal, and it hadn't, so, yeah, so it's pretty open-ended at the moment.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't think we want to leave open-ended. I think there needs to be some structure. How are the funds segregated? Are you segregated in some?
Well, what we'll do is we'll put them in a separate fund.
Okay.
As opposed to putting them in the general fund, they will go into a separate fund.
Okay. Okay.
Shared success fund, yes. Yes, Bob, I
And it's estimated will actual revenue at the end of 18 would be 27,000, or that's the estimate, about 28,000.
Yeah, it's about 28,000, and over the life of it, if you look to the column to the left, it's about 990,000. I think that's based on McGowan Gordon is an 8-year, and the ones above that, they're 25. So that it's not a lot of money over a long period of time, but as more projects come on board, the fund will increase.
So the total estimated, okay, I'm confused by the way the chart's laid out. Are we talking about accumulating the last four rows here from 18, 19, 20, and 21, and that equals, in the case of River Market West, 543,000?
No.
No? I'm
We just
confused.
showed 19, 20, 21.
Oh, that's the pilot.
Because we couldn't take it out to, 25 years out from that, or excuse me, 15
Okay.
years out. So those are just the first 3 payments over the next 3 years.
Okay, so that 543 is over the life of the entire project?
Yeah.
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
That takes us to strategy B, about the Central City Economic Development Sales Tax. Jennifer, with Neighborhoods and Housing, provided us some information. I believe they may be voting today. Oh, yep.
Yeah,
If you
I
can
know
speak
the
to
board.
it. Yeah.
The board is working to have final recommendations based upon the applications they received a few months ago. And again, just from the work that they've been doing since their inception, really was kind of setting up an overall mission statement, working with community input there. You're seeing on the screen just some priorities that the board has established in relationship to funding applications coming in. So focusing in a split on commercial industrial development as well as residential development. And I think, again, they were looking at larger scale, more catalytic projects, especially from a commercial perspective. And residential, they wanted to make sure that any dollars they committed really looked at developments that were encouraging a mix of different incomes and looking at housing development in a mixed use environment. So they're vetting applications. I think to your point, they are voting very soon, and they'll have recommendations to move forward with their first wave of funding. And I think they're potentially, we're looking at trying to do another application round, solicitation round before the end of this year.
Awesome.
Okay.
Right, strategy A, monitor and report performance of the current historic use of incentives. So the incentives analysis.
Sure. So in August, we had our long-anticipated incentive analysis released. It was commissioned to study the goal of our historic policy goal for economic development, creating jobs, remediating blight, generating new investment. On the left, you'll notice the outcomes of the study, which were pretty good. The top left being the best. $3.83 of all tax revenue that was generated with $1 of incentives. And then moving through that, we saw an increase in business sales, economic activity, jobs, per capita income, and personal income. On the right is the 5 steps. So they also performed a process improvement analysis for our incentive policies with the recommendation to enhance our data collection, management, and reporting of incentives, which is basically what is stated on the right. The city staff, OPM, EDC, I think we're convening in the next couple months to really nail down how we're going to define our outcomes and track our incentives. And so that's what we get to look forward from the incentive analysis. This is just a ratio of private investment to abatements granted in fiscal year 2018. It's just our abatement programs over the last year. We were able to generate about $8 of private investment to every $1 of abatement granted. I'll just note that the 2 biggest, LCRA, that was about a 15-to-1, and PIA was almost a 9-to-1 ratio. Between those 2 agencies, they brought on almost 1,000 housing units and 170,000 commercial office space square feet. So pretty happy with those outcomes.
And, and James, the local incentives that's spread out over time, right? That's
Yeah.
the value of the abatement over 10 to
years.
25 years or whatever, however long the term is.
So articulate for me why the taxing jurisdictions would think this was a good thing,
Why they would think it was a good
why
thing?
they should.
Oh, why they shouldn't? Well, I'm pretty biased, so I think it's pretty good.
I was hoping that you were. Otherwise, we'd be looking for somebody to fill your spot. But nonetheless, can you articulate why you think that taxing jurisdictions ought to look at this as a good deal?
As a good deal? Yeah, sure. So just looking at the projects that, I had a list of them and I forgot it, but you know, the assessed values that come online that we're seeing, especially with the next slide, the increase of almost 100%, 500%, from where some of these properties were, not only the sales taxes they weren't generating, but the property taxes that were, I mean, an empty parking lot or a blighted property downtown. Now we're seeing, as a taxing jurisdiction, they're having projects come online that are going to generate them, you know, upwards of. I was running these calculations on the 11th Street corridor yesterday, and you know, 60% of a property worth $1 million, the school district can expect $600,000 that it's a building in the 90s.
Well, I guess one of the things is that, would it be fair to say that their current tax base is as a result, in part, because of the prior investments made that have rolled off?
I would completely agree with that.
And so if these are going to roll off at some point in time in the future, then their tax base will continue to increase.
Exactly.
And since they've not had any increase in the levy for the school district or anything else in how long? 100,000 years?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Since the 1970s. I think was the last time.
Since the 70s, this is an increase in their tax base over time, right?
Correct.
All right. And that's kind of what I was thinking that you were saying. But I think that's something that needs to be articulated, because there's this idea that somehow when we do an abatement, we're actually taking money from someplace, and that money is fictitious. It doesn't exist, and in fact, it's not taking it anywhere. And there's usually a pilot that goes to the taxing jurisdictions that offsets any immediate increase. But for the investments that were made downtown or other places, then their taxes wouldn't have risen. And this concept that somehow they'll build it anyhow is nonsense. We've had several projects where no incentives were offered and they didn't build it. I think one would be the architectural firm that
BNIM, yeah.
BNIM. It wasn't built when those incentives were removed, and as a direct result of that, we lost a pretty good project. And here's what I'd like to see. Bob, maybe you can orchestrate this. I'd like for somebody to keep tally of how many projects we approve versus how many projects we don't. Because I think people think that we approve everything that walks through the door.
We can keep a tally of that. The one caution that I would give to that element is a lot of these incentive processes are pretty expensive to enter into.
Mm-hmm.
And I think developers do a lot of work in advance
Before they get there.
to determine whether or not they're going to be eligible.
Sure.
Will they meet the different qualifications? If the application fee to come in and do a TIF is $25,000, a wise developer will have a pretty good idea whether the project is going to meet the criteria and be successful in terms of all the different eligibility requirements before they apply. And so we don't see very many of the projects, in all honesty, that wouldn't qualify for the incentive
Yeah,
structures.
that's a good point. Okay.
But there are still projects that come through that, for one reason or another, run into a treble hook of some kind, get snagged and don't go. So we certainly can keep track of that.
Okay, we'll see.
I've recorded a follow-up item to have a joint meeting between city staff, EDC staff, to determine the appropriate metrics that are accurate and transparent. So you'll see that in the memo.
Sounds good.
All right, Andrea?
Andrea Dorch with the Human Relations Department. We keep track of the BEW utilization on incentivized projects, specifically the PIA, the TIF, and the LCRA. For fiscal year 2017 and 2018, PIA on construction projects had 23%, or broken down 14% MBE utilization and 8% WBE utilization, which equals $88.9 million in investment in MBE firms and $5.9 million, for MBE and WBE, and $5.9 million for professional services. For TIF, there was $158.2 million for construction overall for MBE and WBE, which breaks down to 15% MBE and 9% WBE. For LCRA, it was $57.9 million in construction services, which was 28% MBE investment and 18% WBE. For professional services, PIA again had 14% MBE and 9% WBE, and TIF had 22.5% MBE investment and 14% WBE, and LCRA had 27% and 16%. And those are overall.
I will freely admit that I am not the world's best chart reader, but I was totally lost there.
What you did,
Yes.
Andrea, was break apart those
Yes,
percentages.
I broke them apart. Yes.
Oh,
So
okay.
the 44% under LCRA is 20.
7
Okay,
and 16.
all right,
Yes.
all right.
I was
What
just trying to
drove- and
confuse you
What drove
today.
those large LCRA projects where you had the exceptional participation? Do you happen to know what?
I think they were more residential in nature, which has more availability for MBE, WBE firms.
Okay.
They also was the only agency that used SLBE for
Okay.
one of their projects.
All right. Objective 4. There.
We didn't hit on this slide, but go back
Which
to-
one?
It's that page 23, which gets to the mayor's point, I think.
The TIF.
The TIF aggregate benefits that you can see for just the plans that we turned off just in this last year, right, James?
Correct.
We had a starting assessed valuation of 8.6 million. We turned it off it had a $54.9 million base valuation. That tells the story in my mind. That's 534% tax increase that I would argue, and the data would argue, but for incentives, would not have occurred. So you would have gotten some incremental number increase, but you would have also run the risk that you would have had declines, because even in that decline, I think it's interesting, even with incentives, the Southtown 31st and Baltimore still had declining property values.
And what happens to the increased tax dollars?
But those go to the various taxing jurisdictions, of which 60%, I believe, is a school district.
Aha. Well, it's a fine kettle of fish, Ollie.
Sorry, I just thought that was the chart of the day,
That was, yeah.
you know, and we missed it. All right, keep going.
Chart of the day. All right. Enhancing operational efficiency, city development activity. So I think we are happy to announce this. Yes, Jeff?
We are very happy to announce that in early August we went live with Compass KC. So that's the city-wide new permitting system and software. So on screen you're seeing the departments that were part of that initial rollout: city planning development, water services, public works, fire, and regulated industries. Ultimately, when system is at full capacity, about 1 out of every 5 city employees will be using this system. But it's not only internal, it's external. It's the portal in which people are now using to apply for permits. They're using this portal to submit plans electronically. They're using this portal to be able to make payments online. So since go live, we were able to really kind of keep going with our operations. Our inspection expectation about being able to somebody to call and in 24 hours get an inspection scheduled and performed. There was maybe 1 or 2 days. We had a little bit of a transition from our old system to the new, but otherwise we've been keeping up. So I think we're at the place where we're beginning to see the benefits. But again, so consolidating permits, consolidating payments. So our finance department, while not on there, is a very integral part of this also. So it means we have more financial control. Payments are monitored through finance. And it's not only this software, it's linking with Inova, it's linking with IG Inspect, a variety of other different softwares. Phase 1B will roll out, I believe the expectation is by the end of the year, and you'll see that's where we'll bring more people into the system, including 311 Neighborhood and Housing Services, Animal Control, and Parks and Recreation. So it's one place, it's one portal for all of us to use and have data. And I'm very happy to roll to the next screen to talk about what our customers are saying about Compass KC. And also, as I'm starting to learn the system, it continues to get better. I mean, that is probably what everybody's feeling is, internal and external. People like the transparency. If anything, the feedback we're getting, we were over-communicating. The system generates emails that talk about inspection results or when a permit is ready to be issued. So a lot of transparency in process. And I guess I'll go to the back one. So far, it seems like a great system to me. So I could end on that customer quote. We're all just working. I mean, the things you have with launching a new technology, making sure we have the appropriate equipment, making sure we have the appropriate support service and staff. But I do commend everyone on our department's team and everybody involved with the project, a multi-year effort. We're able to launch a new software and keep the development process and approval process moving forward. So grateful for that, and we'll keep improving the system.
And I think our team is anxious to get our hands on some data.
On data, yes. Data is coming.
All right, objective 2, strategies to promote social and economic well-being of city residents. So first up would be foster entrepreneurship and small business growth. Rick?
Yeah, thank you. The entrepreneur ecosystem strategic plan, I'm calling a working draft, is just a document I've been keeping and sharing with the community and with city staff, showing where we're making headway in supporting entrepreneurial growth. We had great participation from startup community groups during the resident work sessions. I think we had 20 people that came and participated, really trying to help the community develop a public policy voice and contribute to the work we're doing to support these efforts. On the diversity and inclusion portions of the entrepreneur community. Tech Week, Bob will talk about in a minute here, has a focus. We've got an event called Black Tech Weekend coming up in November during Global Entrepreneurship Week. And a couple of applications. Mr. Mayor, you helped us with the City Accelerator with Living Cities. We're picking that work up with the group to continue with the possibility of a incubator accelerator in the Prospect Avenue neighborhood. Some of the ideas coming out of the work sessions were micro grant support for emerging entrepreneurs, and one actually moving on fairly quickly is providing discounted computers to people that are leaving their day job to become entrepreneurs, get involved in entrepreneurship. So.
Okay, good.
Rick, in the past we'd talked about BizCare and their data. Didn't draw it in this time. Just can you give us a status update on?
I don't have numbers with me, but we are in a transition. John Pager, who was our KC BizCare manager, jumped ship back over to city planning, working with Jeff's group as our development concierge. We're interviewing candidates to fill that position now, and then Sharon Kingsbury, Angeline Grady are the business advocates that we have running that office today. We continue to have, this might be on the next slide, but office hours events around the city, small business focus groups, so that we're still keeping those services rolling while Mr. Pager has moved on to
So new responsibilities.
new responsibilities, right?
All right, Bob, Tech Week.
Yes, Tech Week starts next week. This is our fourth year, I believe, with this conference. Kansas City's one of 6 or 7 cities around the nation that puts on this week-long Tech Week calendar. You can see the schedule of events Rick mentioned, and I wanted to highlight a new element that has been incorporated into it this year is a diversity, minority inclusion focus that takes place on Wednesday. Thank you. You can see the different groups that have partnered with us at the bottom in trying to get this set up. And this is to add sort of a new element and focus to the whole Tech Week conference. And it winds up on Friday, as it does every year, with the announcement of our Launch KC grant winners. And real quickly, Launch KC, this is our 4th year with Launch KC. This is a international startup competition. We end up with 10 award winners every year that get a minimum of $50,000 grants. They're truly grants. We don't take any ownership in the startup companies. They commit to come to Kansas City from wherever they may be located currently. And then we set them up for 2 years, and they have mentoring support from the local business community, tech support from different companies, and space, sort of an incubator accelerator space. And so this Friday, next week, we'll announce those award winners the final day of the Tech Week conference.
What's happened to the last set of award winners? Or what year? Is this the 3rd year of
This will be the 4th class.
4th class?
Yeah.
Are there any from the 1st class still hanging out?
Yes.
Is it too late for Troy and I to get our application in?
Next year's wide open.
I will be too.
Just saying. So we have actually, and I pulled these. These were in last quarter's KCStat, but the first 2 classes, 2015 and 2016, they started with 38 employees, and they're now up to 92, and these are full-time employees.
What do they do?
The companies?
Yeah, well, the ones that you're talking about. Oh, is that the aggregate number?
Yes, that's aggregate, Mayor,
all right,
I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes. The sales of the individual companies that start up, and this is, the Launch KC program is not industry specific, so we have everything from medical devices, a company that's making Braille computer keyboards, to delivery system tech apps, those sort of things. Their aggregate sales of the companies have increased 170% from their first year. A big part of the Launch KC program is that by winning that competition and getting that first $50,000 capital, it really starts to establish credibility for the company and makes them much more successful in going out and attracting additional capital. And the companies are staying in town.
Good.
So far, we've had a pretty high success rate. The average salary in the 2015 class, which is the first year, is now up to $77,000. 2016 class is at a little over $40,000, so there's a kind of a ramp up. But the projected payroll on all these has gone from $2.5 million up to $5 million.
Good.
And that certainly translates into earnings tax components and other elements. But the whole idea is to try and build this startup entrepreneurial community, keep them in Kansas City for a couple years with the goal ultimately to keep them here on a long-term basis.
Okay. Are any of them candidates for the IPP program?
I don't know. I have to talk with you about that.
It seems like if we're doing something that moves that whole continuum, there might be some. How many people do we have in IPP? Seven now?
7 or 8 firms.
Do we have the capacity for more?
Yeah.
So, if I don't know exactly what the mix of companies are over the 4 years, but it would seem that maybe somebody in that mix would be a good fit for IPP. Despite the fact that they're here for the initial 2 years, you said that they tend to hang out. Have we lost any to other places?
We've lost a few. I think the first class of 10, we have 6 still here. One of them's been bought out, which was, I guess
good for them.
Good for them.
Yeah.
That's right. Success for them. And then of the ones that have left, I believe 2 of those that have left are still in the metropolitan area. They're just not technically in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So, Bob, are any of these companies to the point where they are a candidate for support from KC Rising and the work that Darcy Howe is doing as far as
Capital?
more capital?
Add-on capital.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of the elements that all of these companies will go through is they'll do what they call like a mock pitch day, where we will bring in some people from venture capital firms that'll tutor them and give them critiques on their individual pitches to raise additional capital.
Well, and I bring it up only because sometimes companies, when they're big enough, go where the money is, and
Right.
so if we're able to offer that, then that improves the opportunity to keep them growing here. So that's why I bring it up.
Yes, and I would be remiss if I did not point out that the Missouri Technology Corporation is a huge contributor to our fundraising efforts for Launch KC. They have provided us $250,000, which is half of our grant program every year. So any support that anyone can lend to having their budget be supported and increased at the state level would be a great idea.
I just want to make sure, and I know that you guys are probably doing this. I'm thinking Drew is probably fairly on top of this, but I'll say it anyhow. I think that the more we can integrate these companies into various systems that are in place, it might be of a systems, the IPP program, KC Rising, whatever else we can do, the better chance we have of keeping them here and watching them grow in Kansas City. The good point of having them here for 2 years is that they'll probably put down at least some shallow roots and start to build here, which makes it a little bit more likely that they will stay. But I think the more we can tie them into other contexts and systems, the better off we are.
I agree 100%.
Thank you. I'm glad somebody did. I left home and nobody was agreeing with me there.
Been a long morning, huh?
It just looks like it might get longer before the day's over. I'm sorry, honey. I hope you're not watching.
Right, Rick, shop local?
Yeah, and go to the next slide then too, please. Shop Local KC is an initiative that we've had.
Oh, wait a minute, Rick.
Yes,
Before
sir.
we go there, on the diversity and inclusion track, tell me a little bit more about what you're doing there, if you would, please.
Sure. Part of it is bringing in some speakers to talk a little bit about how we open this up in Kansas City. And part of the reason why the Federal Reserve Bank is a sponsor of this, we did a study, I want to say 3 years ago, that looked at the business startup community, minority business startup community in Kansas City. You remember this, Drew presented this at a board meeting.
Right.
And what we found was there's a pretty high rate of minority startup businesses in Kansas City, but they don't grow and they don't go to scale very often. We were like 42nd out of the top 50 cities in that element. So I think part of this is to try and address and educate ways to do that. We're also starting to work on trying to put together as one of our 5 initiatives at the EDC to try to develop a minority targeted business accelerator facility also to deal with. But this is primarily conversation and exposure and people talking about where and why they've been successful in these efforts in other communities.
Were we able to identify why they weren't going to scale and growing? Was it the lack of access to capital? I imagine that just thinking about the traditional barriers for minorities in this country, one of which is banking and money, I can't imagine that they have the same access to capital that a non-minority group would.
No, that's correct.
Okay. Well, that's got to be the issue that's addressed to some extent. If you don't have the capital, you can't do much. And I imagine along with that, there's probably less access to business modeling and training.
Mentors,
all
those elements. And if you remember, Mayor, that's part of the reason why we're sort of trying to refocus the EDC Loan Corporation. But it's a small amount of money compared to what's needed. But that's part of that effort.
Well, I'm all about speakers and information, but what actions are taken is really going to be where the rubber meets the road in this. We can bring all the speakers in the world in. That's not going to necessarily change anything unless we devise an action plan that goes with it. So I'll be interested to see what actions are being contemplated to move this needle a little bit more. Speakers aren't going to do it. If that's all it took, then we would have been able to do it a long time ago.
Could have finished it years ago.
Exactly. But I do appreciate the fact that there's at least a heightened sensitivity to the issue. But the issue needs to be expanded into concentrated, focused action in order to make it better. And good luck with that. I'm only partially kidding. This is not easy stuff. When you're talking about building out minority enterprises and those types of things, and it takes a real focus and some serious commitment to do it.
Do we coordinate our urban business enterprise effort that we fund with EDC? I mean, this is we fund $100,000 a year in scholarships and programs through that fast track. We're trying to get not only giving them speakers, but then allowing scholarship opportunities for minority businesses to go through that. So we need to make sure.
The Urban Business Growth Initiative contract that we do with KC SourceLink, and that provides scholarships to Kinston, Missouri residents. We're just pushing to make that program raise awareness throughout the community. And unfortunately, the business survey we've done, it just kind of shows almost anywhere you go in the community, there's a lack of awareness of the services at KC's BizCare, KC SourceLink, EDC. So we're constantly trying to make those services more aware to the community. I mentioned office hours. That I hold those monthly at Blueford Library, 31st and Prospect. The Urban Business Growth Initiative that Troy's mentioned. We have Maria Myers and Carmen DeHart come in annually to give us a report on that, so I can follow up with more information on where we've seen that business support. And then the other program is the Justine Peterson Microlending Program. They've coached Alt Cap in developing their microloan program, and the Women's Employment Network's microloan program. Just as an example, though, in the Central City Economic Development sales tax boundaries, I had Justine Peterson do a review of their microlending in that geography. Since 2012, they provided over $1 million in loans to more than 63, I think maybe 73 companies. And that was without an intentional focus. So we're moving more to make that focus more intentional and
Okay.
yeah, and we're really just showing a good ROI on all of these programs: job creation, follow-on funding, growth. But as Bob pointed out, as you're making clear, and access to capital in the minority community is a huge problem. The numbers are staggering. I don't have them with me, but they are staggering on just how little funding goes to minority-owned businesses in the startup community.
Okay, well, the good news is that I knew that we would have some focus on it. The bad news is that it's probably a fairly pervasive problem across the country, in most areas of the country anyhow. And we're behind if we're number 42 out of how many?
50
Not good. Are we talking states or cities?
cities,
Okay.
larger communities.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Shop local.
Yeah, so in the Shop Local KC campaign, the KC SourceLink, KC BizCare, we've worked together on this for quite a number of years, actually back to the Special Committee on Small Business in 2011. We ramped up the Shop Local initiatives there. KC SourceLink has a Shop Local page that describes the benefits of buying from locally owned companies, and you can register your business to be posted there. I started a Shop Local KC Roundtable back in December, bringing together business association leaders, Prospect Business Association, River Market, Brookside, Waldo, to share their information on how they're growing, kind of get around a social media campaign, helping what we call Main Street entrepreneurs, the bricks and mortar entrepreneurs. But it's larger than that, because these companies that are coming into, say, Launch KC or the Urban Business Growth Initiative, Scale Up, they're all local companies. They're the job creators in the community. So a few examples here. Tower East, this Wanderfest was a big shopping festival that business owners in the 31st Street corridor put together last fall, and then Truce-to-Palooza was just 2 weeks ago, I believe. Truce Market Collaborative, a lot of the maker movement, entrepreneurs that make things. They have great Etsy pages where they're selling things, but they also are opening storefronts and creating jobs. And then I've talked about office hours on Prospect a bit, so.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
You'll go ahead.
If I could, have we had, Rick, any discussion with some of the smaller immigrant communities that are in Northeast and on the East Side? And I bring it up because many times there's an insular focus within the community, but not much crossover. So, for example, someone along Independence Avenue may see a Somali restaurant but never go in because they don't do the same sort of merchandising as a more contemporary, if you will, person might do. And I say that because one of the other issues that happens along there is the leakage that occurs where people are going outside of their communities to spend their dollars, and they're not keeping those dollars in their communities. And so I can appreciate the fact, of some of the groups from River Market to Brookside talking about what they're doing, but to me there's an even greater issue, which is people aren't spending their money where they live, and therefore businesses aren't growing because people aren't spending their money there. And so can you talk a little bit about how Shop Local KC kind of applies to those sorts of situations?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Independence Avenue CID, Bobby Baker's part of that group and has attended. And she really has an amazing effort going on, really dubbing Independence Avenue as an international marketplace. We've just had a recent KC SourceLink resource partner event at their location. So, yeah, that's all part of this larger plan and strategy of raising awareness of the job creation in neighborhoods, because it's those businesses on Independence Avenue that are going to employ people from the neighborhoods, or on Prospect Avenue that will employ people from the neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, my observation, and it's been a while, has suggested that there has to be some push for people to realize you don't have to drive out to a Walmart in the suburban part of the city, that you can get everything you want, and you can actually help your neighborhood by spending your money in your neighborhood. And so pushing that, I think, as we talk about economic development on the east side, that's going to be a primary way to get that done, is pushing that sort of shopping experience and keeping those dollars where people are making those dollars. So,
With you. Okay.
All right, strategy D.
This is an update on the, it says mentor protege, but this is actually a prime contracting opportunities in that mentorship. And the call out is prime contracts for the race and gender neutral component of the MWBE program, which is the small local business enterprise. For the fiscal year 2017-2018, there were 37 total contracts. 4 were with Parks and Recreation, 18 were with Public Works, 15 were with Water Services, and they made up of construction, facility repair, construction management, and design services, and it was a total of about $4.2 million. The Mentor Protege program is being vetted currently in front of council under the MWBE ordinance.
Okay. Good. You said 15 were what?
Water Services.
Water services. Okay. Okay, good.
We've had good luck with using those SLBE contractors for our small water main replacement projects, less than a mile, small, and a whole lot of sidewalks have gotten built with SLBEs.
Good. Good.
All right, and I'm actually going to step aside and allow Dr. Sarah Martin to come up. And for economic mobility, we actually have started a series, or rather, Dr. Martin has, a series of dashboarding that lends itself to the comprehensive story around economic mobility. So, Sarah, you want to?
Yeah, right there. Thanks.
Good morning. Sarah, Dr. Sarah Martin, Deputy. It's weird being on this side. Strange. I don't know how to talk to you like side by side. It's strange. I'll just talk to all of you.
It's fairly obvious that you're nervous about
I'm
this.
very
It's
nervous.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. You want me to move him closer to you?
No, it's okay. So I'm here representing the Economic Mobility Task Force and work group task force. I think task force sounds, thank you, more exciting. So I go with task force. But there are a lot of people sitting in front of me who are part of it. So Eric and Jeff and Rick and Julie. And so there's lots of us. Alyssa keeps us kind of corralled with Javon Davis. And so I think the real focus of this next coming year is focus for this group. We have a hard time sometimes not just talking and getting really excited about things. And so we kind of used the citywide business plan as a way to get our focus areas for the next year on paper. And so our suggestions to the citywide business plan were to actually change the objective that this strategy lives under to use the word mobility, so that creating an economic mobility plan would no longer, oh, Andre, you're here too. Scott, the whole task force is here. And the actual like mobility in the language of the objective would elevate it to be a value we care about, and then we'd actually get to some real strategies. So the group recently did a really amazing design thinking session on predatory lending, and it focused on empathizing with the users of short-term loans. And I don't think we'd really gone through that exercise of saying, why do people do this? Why do people need to do this? What alternatives exist or don't exist. And out of that came a lot of ideas around what we wanted to move forward on. And those buckets included the legislative priorities at the state level. And so you have part of our CHIP performance dashboard includes a section on predatory lending, and we have a performance goal for 36% APR, and currently we're at 440%. And so in order to get to where we need to be, we need to deal with some state preemption issues. You'll see that the APR is actually rising over time, but the total number of loans over time have actually gone down. The amount of those loans has gone up, and the default rate has gone down. So folks are not defaulting on these loans at the level that the banks and the industry likes us to believe. So they actually aren't more risky than kind of your conventional car loans. And so people are paying back these 440% APR short-term loans. And so we focused on kind of community education on alternatives, because there actually are a lot of programs out there. They're just kind of like a patchwork of programs, and there are currently no city programs establishing short-term emergency loans. St. Louis has recently got into that business, and so we're going to kind of see how that goes with them first. And then we do have a lot of power here at the city level to strengthen the regulations on inspections, and so we're in talks with regulated industries to think through how we could use the permit process to actually enforce some of the rules around what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say in these places. And so, you know, the overall performance objective for economic mobility goes back to our resident insights survey. So this is we ask on the resident insights survey how you feel compared to your parents. And you know, it's not a perfect measure. If we had IRS data, we'd actually be able to validate this. But only about half feel that they're doing somewhat better, and that definitely varies by place. And it definitely varies by demographics. And so you can go to these dashboards, go through yourself, but we see that the greatest correlation is going to be by income. And so, you know, there's just this complete linear relationship. And we know that economic mobility is actually bad for your health. And we know those are correlated, and we know it goes both ways, right? So your poor health actually decreases the likelihood that you're able to build wealth. And so this, our task force has always been really focused on changing the conversation from income to wealth building, and really focusing on the entrepreneurship. We're talking worker cooperatives, looking at the money bill system, like all of these determinants of actual wealth building. And I'll leave you with this, because I think this is probably the most important correlation we do. Even though the data is a few years old, it still holds that this is census tracked poor mental health among adults correlated with median household income, because we don't have really good measures of wealth. We kind of use it as a proxy. But you see one of the strongest correlations we see throughout any of these analytics is like negative 0.8. Meaning there is almost a complete linear relationship between mental health and economic mobility. And so that's why we keep doing what we're doing and trying to focus and trying to get some policies moved. So that's my update. So, thank you. Oh,
Sir,
you have a question for me or
just
comment?
a connection to the startup community and the payday lending. There's a company, Solo Funds, that's come to Kansas City to be part of the TechStars program. And they chose Kansas City. I mean, it's good, bad. Chose to come here because of our history of payday lending. And so it's a peer-to-peer lending platform and they're up and running. They're growing through Techstars, and then we're looking at ways to partner with them to help advance their effort, because it's really terms agreed upon by the two parties that are lending and borrowing.
You reminded me, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, because I think it's the last KCStat Health will be at before the November directors meeting, will be LifeX Summit 3.0. And this year is really going to be focused on what we do for our employees. And so incentivizing wealth building, keeping people out of the predatory lending cycle who work in our buildings. So we're going to put our heads together to think, what would an employee health improvement plan look like that also focused on social and economic factors and wasn't just focused on wellness, which is important for lots of reasons, but that we would think through what can we do, like small P policies within the city to actually implement the chip in our own workforce. And so that's going to be the focus of November, and that will definitely be part of the conversation. So thank you. Yes.
You're not done
Hi.
yet.
Hi.
Sarah, I was trying to figure out from the charts that you had up there, especially those related to the rate of default among those who are using payday lending, and how that has gone down precipitously, as well as some of the other things you put up there. I guess my question to you is it a matter of having greater availability of more traditional banking outlets? Is it, well, I'll just put it the way, does that help the matter if people had other choices? I guess I'm asking partly is part of the use of those sorts of lenders based on the fact that that's what's available, that's what's around me,
Right.
that is easy to get to, it's harder to get to another banking option, so that if those banking options were available, that the likelihood is that you might see a shift of individuals who may choose to use a more traditional banking model as opposed to that.
That definitely is going to be part of it. I know that in Kansas City, our credit unions are actually some of the most robust sources of alternatives
Right.
that do use a 36% APR and don't let you renew perpetually. Part of this is actually also likely related to the ACA and the decrease in medical debt. Some of it, sadly, can actually be put on internet lending, which also we see a huge spike in internet lending, which we don't track through the
Right.
Missouri Department of Revenue unless they're located here. And so we have to find better ways to figure that what's going on there. There's also a substitution towards pawn shops that pay utilities straight up pay your utilities instead of giving you a check. This is also around when the planning and zoning restrictions on payday loans went into or payday loan shops went into effect, which dropped the number of payday loan stores by about 30%. And so making it harder for them to open, reduce the alternatives, but could have pushed people into the 400 spam emails you get a day on like click here and get your money.
Right.
And so that's made it a little bit difficult. It also could sadly be because less risky people are entering the pool. And so if we see some sort of economic crisis or some sort of contraction in that way, we might see people who never opened a payday loan before entering into those because they need the money and they didn't need it before. So it's definitely complicated, but I do want to give a lot of credit to the city planning department. We actually have some of the strongest planning and zoning regulations on payday loan shops in the entire country. And so when I went to do best practices, and Kansas City kept coming up, and so we should be really proud because it has been very, very effective. Now we have to take on the permits. The permits currently are $1,000 to operate. That's very low compared to other cities of our size, and we could use some of that money for enforced regulations, requiring payday loan stores to give education and then doing a secret shopper to figure out whether they're actually doing that. In a perfect world, we could fund an emergency loan fund of our own, but I really do want to see how it works out for St. Louis first. Yeah.
One other.
Do you know, Sarah, do you know what the source of that emergency loan fund, how did they?
My understanding was that they got some seed money, they got it matched with some banks, and they were able to invest it and then have this pool of money. Part of what they did also was open an actual payday loan store. So the most amazing thing about St. Louis is they kind of went through the process we did of what draws people to payday loan stores. It's because they don't feel like a bank.
Right.
They're not scary. You know,
Right.
they have sign spinner. Like we always talk about the sign spinner, but that was actually a really important part of the model. It's called Red Dough, and it looks like a payday loan store. So it doesn't look like a government building or a bank. And that was really important to attract the clients that they needed to make an impact. So I want to keep an eye on that.
Well, as I know, Mr. City Manager, you and I have talked about from time to time, there is a credit union that Kansas City has that it would be interesting to have a conversation as to how it might be used in these sorts of ways. But one last question for you, Sarah. As far as, and if I missed it, I apologize, but as for the reasons people give to use a payday lender, I know when we talked about the small business piece, some people were using that to move, pay for payroll until they got paid. And with Justine Peterson and other alternatives, we've been kind of dealing with that particular issue. But you had mentioned the utilities with the pawn shops. I'm just kind of curious as to what drives those decisions, and that may help us with the solution as well.
Yeah, I think that's the next plan for us, is to acquire some resources to actually take these design thinking sessions out to the community co-creation, as they call it. So not listening sessions, not town halls, but actually like create a solution that fits your needs. Utilities and rent are the number one reasons why people take out short-term loans. Utilities being the most prevalent, and I think that's where we also have to take a look at ourselves and say how many payday loans are being taken out for things that the city has some control over. And we just need to get our hands on a little better data
Gotcha.
for that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to digital equity strategic plan.
Plan, we have been working with our Coalition for Digital Inclusion on implementation. Most recent update is that we have a digital upcycling program partnership with the Surplus Exchange. We give Surplus Exchange our surplus computers and smartphones. They refurbish these in our digital inclusion efforts. At the recent Core 4 session, I pitched the idea that Core 4 local governments, Johnson County, Jackson County, Wyandotte County, KCK, join us in that initiative. So I'm working with Surplus Exchange and then e-Stewards at the national level to implement that program. Idea at some point, after we see some success with those 4 local governments, would be to go to MARC and then the business community, because the business community, as I'm seeing, and digital equity is not as engaged as they certainly need to be, because it's definitely workforce development, and that's kind of the update I have right now.
All right, let me get my computer working here. All right, so that, identify creative space development needs of the arts, culture, and creative sector. Megan?
Yeah, there's not much to report on that. Megan Krieger, Director of Creative Services. The final data was presented at the last cycle. So, next slide.
All right, while you've got the mic, let's roll into Objective 5, enhance the city as a destination for leisure and business travel. First strategy up is in TDF.
Yeah, so this appeared for the first time this year to monitor the Neighborhood Tourist Development Fund, and we track data in all kinds of ways, and so what I'm presenting here I think is very relevant to economic development. However, if there's something else that you all would like to see, let me know. The first one is measuring local versus visitor audiences, and I'll explain why that has some relevance in a minute. And these numbers come from actual reported by the organizations in their final report. So the data is as good as the capacity, quite frankly, of the organizations being able to accurately track data. We still have 30% outstanding from the final reports, and we're investigating why that is. Some organizations just may not be turning in their final reports and getting funding. I want to specify that local is defined as persons living within the city of Kansas City, Missouri. This is not defined by county. And that visitors include persons coming from anywhere in the region, including Kansas. And so we differentiate between Missouri being state and then Kansas being national. So we probably need to shift that definition because we have the state line issue that there's a regional economic impact might more align with local visitors, which I'll explain here in a minute.
Megan, I had a quick question on the ensuring the accuracy of reporting on the data.
Yeah.
Is there a template that has been provided to the organizations
for data collection?
Yeah, for data collection.
No, what we do ask them in their application to tell us how they're measuring, and then in the final report we compare that and see how they implemented it. Because these organizations have various capacity, we don't want to be in the position of telling them how to do it. And so I've been talking with other partner organizations to develop workshops that would assist them in both data collection in audience, but also marketing. I mean, one of my talking points in workshops is you should be spending 15% of your project budget on marketing, and so often that is not the case. So I think education is going to be a big part in, making sure we refine these numbers. And before we leave this slide, so again, actual in quotes, data of audience attendance, we are seeing an increase in local resident attendance. Again, 30% is out, and I have to give credit to Consuelo Cruz, our arts marketing coordinator. Since the city is administering these funds, we spend a lot of our efforts and energy focused on attracting our residents as audience, and we rely on these organizations to spend those dollars to market outside of the city, and so we will see how that trend continues in the future.
Yeah, just a quick question, Corey. Is there a template, or is there something that could be shared across agencies that could assist these organizations with measuring their visitor impact or the number of attendees? I just didn't know if there was like a great industry standard for how to do that would be easy for them.
There's actually not. When we do our visitor impact studies, that's a very involved process. I do know just from another community that I worked in Columbia, they have a fund, if you will, that is similar to this, and I know that one of the pieces they have is there has to be data collection, all that kind of stuff, but they've had the fund for several years. So, that might be something that they may have a template or a formula of some kind, and I'm sure might be worth checking into, but I'm not completely sure. I wasn't hands-on with that, so.
Economic impact?
Oh, and the format went wompy, I'm sorry. What this slide really is indicating or intending to show is that cultural tourists spend more. There's been state and national data that show that cultural tourists over other tourists spend more dollars. The data that you'll notice, the asterisks, is based on a calculator provided to us through the Arts and Economic Prosperity 5 study that we completed last year. It was the first time that the city of Kansas City, Missouri participated, and so now we have a differentiation between the regional data, and it measures the economic impact through direct, indirect, and induced. And so that's where these numbers come from. That's why it says estimate at the top. We are using the same calculator to get to these numbers. We've learned through that study that non-resident attendees spend an average of 43% more per person than local attendees. So local is going to likely spend $21, and a visitor is going to spend $31 as a result of their attendance. I want to clarify, too, that, NTDF has a broad scope in terms of the types of activities that we fund, including recreation. And in the NACE codes and in the AEP5, it does include recreation. And so all of those tournaments and sports, I want them to know that they are included in this data. On the right, you'll see kind of the top three that all residents and visitors are spending. It's on meals, so restaurants, transportation, and then third is lodging. There's a whole list of other things that is spent. So based on this actual data, we see a higher percent of visitors than local attendees in 2018. This is last year's complete data. And we're showing a total of audience spending only at almost $42 million. So that is a direct infusion of those dollars back into our economy. The next section is economic impact per $100,000 of direct spending by the organizations. Whereas the first data came from final reports, the first one comes from applications. And so this is really a projection of what organizations intend to spend based on their projects. So last year, council approved $1.8 roughly million as the allocation for NTDF over 4 quarters. And again, using that calculation through the AEP5 study, the organizational expenditures, again, based on applications, was roughly $27.6 million. That is the equivalent of 866 full-time jobs, both directly and indirectly. It could include 1 full-time employee or 2 half-time employees is how they're measuring it. It also equates to $27.7 million in resident household income, often called personal income, including salaries, wages, entrepreneurial income paid to residents. And it's the money residents earn and use to pay for food, shelter, utilities, and other living expenses. And then lastly, using the calculator, that $27 million equates to roughly a little over $700,000 in our local government revenue. And what's not shown here is $1.1 million at the state level. So that is, again, extrapolating from that study, but I think it's the first time we've been able to look at numbers based on the city's investment in these nonprofit arts and cultural organizations. Next slide. Here I showed a version of this same data at the last cycle. And so this is, again, based on all of the final reports from last fiscal year. We are seeing an uptick in District 1 and District 2. So this slide is showing number of events per city council district. Uptick in District 1 and District 2 and District 3, seeing pretty significant. Interestingly, District 4, District 5, District 6, slight decrease. I want to, if I may.
Sorry.
I want to put I want to also make sure everyone is aware, we just announced it end of last week that we will not be having a 4th quarter for this current FY19 NTDF application cycle. So this is the captured data for FY19, and that may be what is contributing to the decrease in District 4, 5, and 6, because those do tend to have higher applications, especially in 4th quarter when we have a lot of events that are starting February 1st to April 30th, springtime, lots of things happening. So any questions on that? Yeah, okay. And last, I just threw this up just as a reminder. This will be the first full year that the NTDF committee has adopted eligibility criteria. Those criteria are directly tied to the state statute, showing the purpose of the fund being to promote neighborhoods in conjunction with the city as an international trade, convention, visitor, and tourist center. High, heavy points toward economic and neighborhood impact. Obviously, this is a competitive process, and so we want the projects that come forward to be competitive and to excel in the quality of offerings. And of course, organizational capacity. What they propose to do, is it really feasible? Is that something that the city wants to invest in and see that kind of return on investment? So it's true that ultimately when we see non-resident visitors, they have a higher economic impact for our city. I think when I came in, there was an understanding of visitors being from across the city, and while that certainly helps with local business and spending in that area, and is still very valuable. I think that the real kind of gold star is attracting those coming from outside the city and attracting those visitors who are already here, which is explicitly stated in the ordinance, to get them out to see the cultural vitality of our city. And by supporting those smaller organizations as well as the large, it gives that kind of what the tourism industry talks about, the authentic experience of Kansas City that we're offering. So that's what I have.
All right, thanks, Megan. All right, that takes us on to KCI.
Good morning. John Green, representing Aviation Department. Clearly, the airport's goal here is to construct the new terminal facility, and that project has been underway now for several years. But the successful vote back in November of 17 really pushed us into overdrive. And we are currently working on the environmental assessment. We expect that to be completed by the end of the year. One of the critical stages this past year was the validation process with our partner airlines. This was very critical in that the airlines announced that they thought the facility needed to be a bit larger with a few more gates, which lends itself potentially to additional flights and possibly additional destinations. Our schedule has us with a grand opening somewhere around November of 2022. With an air service update, speaking of new destinations, the airport added 7 new destinations this past year and welcomed 3 new airlines. We had Vacation Express, OneJet, and Iceland Air. Unfortunately, OneJet ceased operations, so we have canceled our direct flight to Pittsburgh, but our air service development folks are looking to other airlines to fill that void. Iceland Air has loaded their preliminary summer 2019 schedule, and it's indicating that they'll increase their frequencies out of Kansas City to Iceland from 3 per week to 4 per week. We're continuing to see a trend of our airline partners upgauging their aircraft or increasing the size of the aircraft. And but what we're also noticing is that the load factors, which is the percentage of the aircraft that is full, is remaining constant. So we're seeing larger aircraft with a similar percentage of capacity filled, which leads to more passengers per departure. In 2018, we are, on the next slide, we are on pace. We're a little above 104 passengers per departure. We're on pace to set a new record at KCI for passengers per departure. And what that really translates to is a little more pressure on our gate hold room areas. We're starting to see them become a little bit more crowded. Next slide, we talk about enplanements. Those are the folks that actually board an aircraft at KCI, and we are, in 2018, we're currently growing at about 2.7%, closing in on 3%. This would be 5 consecutive years of growth. The interesting thing is that we have the possibility this year of reaching 6 million enplanements, which would tie us for the all-time high for activity at the airport. The next slide talks about customer satisfaction. I'm going to turn that over to the Office of Performance Management to speak on, but I did want to note one thing on this slide before I turn it over. The availability of parking. You see that that's declining. We do anticipate that will continue to decline as we move forward with the project, as we create the construction area for the new terminal program. We're going to have to close off some of our close-in service parking areas. So we will proactively message that to our customer base, but we would expect that the availability to decline.
Yeah, so speak just briefly to the data. Obviously, this is from our resident satisfaction survey, so this would be city residents. It's statistically valid samples. So what you're seeing is just that sort of that slow, steady decline with food, beverage, and other concessions, a fairly steep drop-off over the last couple of years. And I think that's probably, you talk about something over and over again, it's publicized, people begin to form an opinion. And so I think we're seeing that in this data, that their experience, what they hear in the news, what their friends are saying is starting to impact resident satisfaction overall. And likewise, this one, we've been sort of monitoring folks who visit KCI and their perception. We've started asking the question of, have you flown out of KCI as an additional look at that data. So this represents percent satisfied, the blue line, percent dissatisfied, the orange line, and then the slight variation between the dissatisfaction among folks who have flown out of KCI versus the dissatisfaction of folks who have not. And so you can see those who are non-flyers have a lower dissatisfaction. So those who have experienced the service have a higher level of dissatisfaction, and satisfaction levels are about the same there. All right, strategy B.
Okay, thank you, Julie. So it has been a very exciting 6 months at Visit KC, but the most exciting, I think, is the addition of our new CEO, Jason Fulvey, who we welcomed. He and his wife, Tina, I believe they moved officially September 7th, so they have been busy. So I just wanted to welcome Jason. Jason, no offense on the canceled flight to Pittsburgh. I don't know what that's about. You'll have to take that up with One Jet, I guess. That's how we welcomed Jason, was our big win over Pittsburgh the week he moved here. So anyway, return on investment. This is a slide that we use often. There will be new information when we are back in April. This is a study. This is the visitor impact study that I referenced earlier, which is quite involved. And we do this every 2 years. But the piece that we wanted to pull out of here, the mayor had mentioned this last time as far as local tax revenue. That is at $215.5 million, which is the tax revenue that comes in from the visitors that come in from outside of Kansas City. That is kind of a big number to wrap your head around, and so I believe what's probably most important to the cities of Kansas City, or the citizens of Kansas City, Missouri, is that by the visitors coming in, we are saving each household $550 a year in taxes. So of course that's what, there are a number of things we get up and do, but providing economic impact and positively impacting the lives of our Kansas City citizens is one of the most important. Total hotel room nights booked for future meetings. We are on a very good trend upward, as you can see. We have a lot of new hotel room nights that we have added into the market this year, which is very significant because of all of the opportunities that we're being presented with our new inventory, which we'll talk about in a little bit on a different slide. The 2018 yearly placement, this just shows where all of these room nights are being placed in future years. One of the pieces that I would like to point out, 2019 and 2020 have been opportunity years for us. And so we have focused a lot of our efforts on making sure that those are healthy years. You can see trends in what we do as to when you start to build a healthy year, and some of them that might be a little bit softer. But our team has been able to add, as of yesterday, we just added another big group, but we've added over 90,000 room nights in 2019 since we were here last year in October. So that's very exciting because, of course, that correlates to a major increase in our economic impact as well. Some of the major events we've booked in 2018, one of the biggest that is the contributor of adding those new room nights in 2019 and 2020 was Destination Imagination. That is we call it STEAM, the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics-based group out of, they were actually created 19 years ago in Knoxville at UT. They have grown to the point where they needed to have a bigger place to go. And so we were triumphant over St. Louis and Louisville to welcome DI to Kansas City in 19 and 20. To have a group of that size book that short term is really pretty unheard of. This group, I know many of you remember, this group is actually only 5,000 room nights off of replacing Skills USA. So, and it's even about the same time of year. So we are going to keep Mike and his team very busy over at the convention center as DI comes in and moves out, and ETS, I believe, starts the next day, which are the two largest citywide room night wise that we'll see in 2019. So I don't know what we need to do for the team. Cookies, lots of food and coffee, I'm not sure, but we do appreciate that. And another group on this that I would like to point out, of course, is the 2022 National League of Cities. Both of these were major community efforts in order to get these groups here. Visit KC can come up with the RFP and we can go and get the lead, but it really takes everyone in our community and our stakeholders to make this happen and really impress the people when they come in. And an extra thanks to Councilman Reed for going with us to Joplin in 2017, I believe it was 17, to make the first pitch. And then we invited NLC to come in for a site visit. We originally bid on 19, and they were so impressed that they ended up going somewhere in 19, but they gave us 22 without a new RFP process. So we were very excited about that. They loved Kansas City, and we're excited to welcome them in 22. 2019, the top 25 conventions. As you can see, they will account for about 225,000 room nights and 175 million in economic impact. That just lists a few of our major ones. Of course, we are very fortunate to continue to welcome back ETS, USA Volleyball, Cerner, and Big 12. Those are what we would refer to as annuals, which are extremely important to making sure that we have a good base to add all of these new room nights on top of. This is just to kind of give a little perspective as to where we are in the hotel development pipeline. Every time a hotel opens, it is a new opportunity for growth as far as our visitors are concerned and the ability to welcome more visitors each year. So this shows the recent openings. As you can tell, fills the slide right up. So we have been very busy welcoming new members to our hotel community. Those are under construction, of course, the largest being the Lowe's Kansas City, which is also the one that will open after all of the others. And then the announced is getting, as you can see, is actually accounts for the most number of hotel rooms. So we're excited to see how all of that will play out. And as I said, it's always an opportunity for growth. Visitor Influencer Program. This was the program that was developed by a young lady within Visit KC whose name is Ashley Patton. We are thrilled to have her on our team. She is very bright and very energetic, and she took this project on when she came into Visit KC actually as an intern. And it is an education program creating Kansas City ambassadors by our own citizens. It was started with the thought of the frontline employees being, Uber drivers or taxi drivers or, concierge desks at the hotels, so on and so forth. But we've been lucky to be able to expand that. And I know I've mentioned a few times that the inaugural class was actually the Kansas City Police Department. So, talk about people being on the front line. It's great to have them as our partners and ambassadors. But since then, we have also welcomed several city departments, including the legislative aides, members of the mayor's office, Parks and Rec. So we hope to see more people continue to go through these classes because there is a lot of great information and it does empower people. As friendly as we are, although that is cliche, it is very true. It's nice to give them the information when they talk to all of our visitors, especially in the downtown area. The Visitor Center, I apologize in advance for these percentages. Julie, there is a slide that should have been emailed to you, so apology, but that is on me as much as anybody. But nonetheless, as you can see, we've been very fortunate to increase partner referrals, phone calls, visitors. Actually, already in 2018, we are only 4 states short of welcoming all 50 states to the Visitor Center. So I'm going to come up short on 4 of them, but if you know anybody from New Hampshire, Wyoming, or Maine, I believe the other one is Alabama, we need them to come by and say hi and sign in so we can round out the 50. We have also welcomed 17 countries also in the first 3 quarters of 2018. 2018 Restaurant Week is gearing up, always an exciting week. The app will go live at the beginning of November, so watch our social media because you will need to start making reservations quickly. As all of you know, this fills up our office, and all of the restaurants continue to be huge supporters. It has been so successful. We're very proud of it. Right now we have 113 restaurants. Restaurants, just as all of the other friends we have in the hospitality business, we tend to wait until the last minute. So last year we had 192 restaurants, I believe. So we don't have any doubt that we'll get another 80 restaurants actually by the end of the registration period to round out Restaurant Week for 2019. National Media Mission, we mentioned this in April. Before it happened, this is an annual event that we actually host in New York. We take Kansas City to the folks of New York. So this year on Wednesday, the 20th of June, we were able to welcome 150 guests and 75 members of our media. You can keep rolling through these. I'll talk as we. And as always, we were very pleased to be able to take these food and drink ambassadors with us from Kansas City. These are just an incredible group, a small sampling of the incredible talent that we have here in Kansas City that not only provided, of course, the entrees, the beverages, and then also dessert from Sava. In addition, the makers and musicians, to Rick's point earlier, the maker movement in Kansas City is huge. And so we were able to bring folks from Made in KC as well as Hammer Press Design Studio just to give the folks there a sampling of what they would get when they come to Kansas City and how entrepreneurs are very common in Kansas City. We have a lot of awesome things to offer. And in addition, of course, Hembry was there to showcase the local musicians that we have in Kansas City as well. So some early results that we have seen directly from the National Media Mission are here on the screen. As you can see, USA Today, Manhattan Digest. Over on the right, just some clips of what they had to say about us. Although we don't look at ad equivalency in its pure meaning, we do know that we have seen over 2 million impressions at this point, meaning there are 2 million people that may not have seen anything about Kansas City had it not been from the media mission as a result of the coverage that we've received. And of course, marketing was very clear for me to say that there's much more on the way. So we will keep you updated on that, but we do have every intention of doing this again in 2019.
Corey, I got a question, and it was
Sure.
Raised by Councilman Wagner before he left, was have we thought of trying to incorporate that UNESCO City of Music designation that we have in some of our marketing materials? We're the only one in the United States that has that. And so Councilman Wagner was curious, how do we take that and use that, leverage that to our advantage as we go forward? And I think that's a question as we think about how we do marketing and outreach, to just put that designation out there, because it sounds like we may be the only one in the United States for a while since.
Yeah.
So-
You always want to capitalize on that.
Right,
So
so-
I don't know the answer to that directly, but I will take it back to marketing, and we'll do a follow-up with you on that. Thank you for the question. So, as always, very proud to talk about the Kansas City Film Office. We have welcomed, Steph Scuppum has been a one-woman show since they opened in since we reopened the Film Office in 2015. We are thrilled to be able to welcome Rachel Kephart to our team as well. So they have been very busy. I was going to say, Julie, I sent you the percentages on this one.
That's a display issue.
I'm kidding. And so far in 2018, we have assisted 155 projects. And this graph will show you where those projects fall. So as you can see, we still are hosting much of the ones of the projects that we are assisting do fall in commercials and TV, although as you can see, we are starting to open that graph up to new opportunities. And I know that Steph and Rachel every day are looking for new projects for us to fund. And I would be remiss without, of course, always saying thank you to the city for being so supportive of the film office through the incentive that is offered. One of the biggest projects that we have done this year, which we'll talk about at the very end of this, of course, we would not have seen that project without that incentive. And it's always good to note that Kansas City is the only city in the United States that does not have a state incentive that actually has a city incentive in spite of that. So again, we are very thankful to the city for that support. The economic impact of the Kansas City Film Office, you can see that we have the grown leaps and bounds from, I'm sorry, I said 15, opened in 14, between 14, 15, 16, 2017, still a very good year, and we are on track for this year to see the same economic impact, or at least near the same economic impact that we saw in 2017. Again, with that big project, if you want to move to the next slide, of course, announced Queer Eye earlier this year. Those have not been put into 2018 yet, so we will see that number increase. The team from Queer Eye has been absolutely outstanding. They have not only come into Kansas City and really just embraced Kansas City. I have several friends on Facebook that are always, taking those side pictures of when they're spotted just simply going to get coffee. But I know that they have said a number of times how welcome they've felt. But they have given back to us even since they've been here by participating in events and panels, and of course helping our own City Hall win the City Hall Selfie Day from the ELGL Members' Choice Awards. So that was very exciting. I know they had fun doing that. But this has been definitely a highlight of Visit KC. We're very proud of the Film Office for the work they've done.
All right, Mike, you're up.
Good morning, Mike Young, Convention and Entertainment Facilities Department. Strategy A is what we're reporting on today, and that is to continually invest annual appropriated capital improvement projects for the city's convention and entertainment facilities. Last time we met, I had given you information on multiple projects that we had completed, and then some projects that we were working on starting and planning. So right now, in Municipal Auditorium, we've done a lot of work in there in the last couple of years. Final phase to work over there right now is underway. It's the roof replacement project. That roof is approximately 30 years old, or could be older. We're not totally sure, but it definitely needs to be replaced. So we're working on that currently. The HVAC air handler renovation project in the arena is underway as well. There's 4 large air handlers in that space inside the arena that provide heating and cooling to that entire complex. We're renovating all 4 units. They're about the size of this room. So they're quite large. The equipment in those rooms is circa, could be in the 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way to the 80s. So there's been a lot of mishmash of equipment being installed in there, so we're trying to get that back up to a current standard. So looking forward to that project. We're also working through our ADA renovation projects throughout the building, and that includes our elevator renovations. At some point, all of our elevators will be renovated fully to meet ADA requirements. Right now, the Municipal Auditorium elevators are currently under renovation right now, and they should be done by the end of the year. We completed our music hall sound system and theatrical lighting replacement back in April, just after this KCStat meeting. That was a great project. The lighting in that building was in the mid-'80s. So we were really encouraged to be able to get the funding to replace all of the theatrical lighting in that space, as well as the carpet. Our conference center was built in 1994. It has never had a roof replacement, and we're currently starting that project after the municipal auditorium roof is completed. So our contractor through the city contract will just move right over to the conference center and replace that roof at the same time. We're also doing elevator renovations in the conference center. Those have primarily wrapped up right now. They've all been renovated. That includes all of our passenger elevators and our freight elevators. The Grand Ballroom kitchen build-out is in the design phase. We're anticipating the Lowe's Hotel to open in 2020, spring of 2020. So in anticipation of the hotel opening, we're going to have that kitchen built out to their specifications and to meet all of the needs of our customers in the ballroom and the conference center. This past winter, just before our last KCStat meeting, we replaced our exhibitor network switch. That's a large switch. It's about the size of a your trunk in your car. It's big. It takes care of our exhibitor network that all of our clients utilize the internet and the Wi-Fi for. We replaced that, and now we have had no issues, no complaints regarding our internet service, so that was a good replacement. We also replaced our main kitchen dishwasher. If you can imagine, it's about the size of this entire table here. It services up to 5,000 dishes in one night, so it's a large piece of our operation. We were able to secure the funding to replace that. It took about a month to replace that entire dishwasher, so it is quite large and important to our operation. At our last meeting, I reported that we were upgrading our security camera system throughout the facilities. This is a large project for us. It's very dependent on our events and when we can work in the facilities. So it's been an ongoing project. We're trying to wrap that up by the end of this year. We're currently in a municipal auditorium and doing the exterior of the facilities. All of the convention center has been completed. The municipal auditorium parking garage has some new cameras, so we're able to provide a higher level of security. If there's any incidents, we'll have recordings. If anybody gets hurt, we'll know how those things happen. So that's been a great improvement for us. We're continually working on doing 5-year projections of what we need to do in the way of capital improvements. We've deferred quite a bit of maintenance over the years, so we're just trying to chip away at that deferred maintenance. Several projects, including the ADA renovations in the exhibit hall, will be done in the next year. The grand ballroom ADA renovations will be done in the next year as well. We're going to be replacing our grand ballroom carpet in anticipation of the Lowe's opening. That's an important project for us. We're targeting December of 2019 to complete that. It's about a 5-week project. Again, working around events is a challenge for us, so we have great contractors that we meet with on a regular basis, and we have to plan this out 2 years in advance in a lot of instances. So we really have to be proactive in planning out those projects. Our meeting room 2122 carpet I believe was installed in about 2006, so it's aging and needs to be replaced as well. We'll be requesting funding through the finance department and the budget process this year. We hope to have that done in the next 12 to 24 months. That would be a great improvement for us. Our lobby 2200 escalator is a 1974 model, so it needs to be replaced. It's our primary escalator that accesses the exhibit halls upstairs. It has the highest usage, has the most hours of use on it. And we need to replace that, so we'll be requesting funding for that project as well. Our music hall restroom renovation project, we were constantly just trying to find ways to improve the music hall. That's a big project. There's 2 levels of restrooms in that facilities, and I would say that our #1 complaint that we have from attendees is the restrooms. We really don't receive many other complaints about anything else, maybe parking here and there, but that's something that we can't always control. But the restrooms is something that we've identified as a significant customer complaint, and we're going to be working with the budget office in the future to find funding for that project. And then that dovetails into our little theater, would be the next level priority down for us. That space it's an amazing space if you've never been in it. It's great for weddings, special events. We do a lot of meetings in there as well. Those restrooms are about the same age as the music hall, so we'll be lobbying finance department again for those renovations. Last time we met, I talked a little bit about our top 10 public shows. Corey, she gets to talk about the conventions, which are fabulous for us. They really help generate a lot of economic impact to the city, as well as our public events do too. So this is just a list of upcoming public shows in chronological order there. We've got Junior League Holiday Mart coming up here in October. That's a big event. They draw over 20,000 people. If you haven't been to that, it's a fabulous event. It draws people from all over the region. Mika Auto Auctions, they actually do 2 shows with us. They love Kansas City. They're treated very well. They've told me that time and time again that this is probably the city that they love to come to the most because of the way that we treat them, and also how many vehicles they sell, which is their primary goal. So if you have a chance, you can catch them on television. They are broadcast internationally. They started in Kansas City back in probably the early 2000s down in Hale Arena. Back then it was really just kind of a lower level auction. They weren't on television, and they've grown this into an event that utilizes the entire exhibition hall, which is 388,000 square feet of space. So if you haven't been to that event, it's really neat. They do auction them off right there, and you can buy cars for whatever you think they're valued at. So it's a really neat event to attend. We have the Perfect Wedding Guide bridal show in January, followed by the Kansas City Sports Show, which has been here for, I think, 100 years or more potentially. I think it's what they promote, so that's a fantastic show for us. The RV show in the last several years with the boom in the economy has really seen some significant sales growth. They had their record attendance, I think, 2 years ago, and they have just kind of seen a growth every year. They're completely out of space. They would love to have another 100,000 square feet of space, but we're just booked solid all winter long, so we try to give them as much space as we possibly can. The Kansas City Auto Show is also another long-term show for us. It's been in the city for over 70 years. They take up all of our halls, A through E. That's a fantastic show. That's always in March. We'll have another Mecum Auto Auctions in the winter, late March, followed by the HBA Home Show, which is the Home Builders Association lawn and garden show that we do. Our largest public show, which is now considered a conference as well because of the amount of hotel rooms they book, is the Planet Comic-Con. That event's been in the city for over 20 years. They started out in a small, I think a hotel banquet room, and they've grown it to 60,000 people over 4 days. So it is truly our largest event that we do all year just based on pure attendance. It's a record setter for the facility. No event has ever eclipsed that attendance for an event that's been in our facilities. So they consume every space that we have, including the sidewalks outside. So we're trying to find more space for them continually. Total events held at the convention center. This is a key data point for us. It's something that we're constantly watching. We've seen over the years the attendance has grown with the economy. We see more people coming to more public shows. We see more people attending conventions and conferences. Weddings and banquets have been strong. Our meetings and our graduations are always historically strong. I think we're doing something like 17 graduations a year now, which is a lot. Our consumer shows have been very strong in a way of attendance. In the fiscal year 18 closing out, we had just under 700,000 people in attendance. That's quite a bit on that carpet, so we have to constantly be working to make sure the facilities are clean and ready for the next event. Customer service is another key data point for us. This is something that we work on daily. When you have that many customers coming through the building, we have upwards of 289 events, so that's 289 clients, 700,000 attendees. So customer service is our priority number one. That is our business. Last year, we closed out at 4.7 in our sales and a 4.6 in our event services, which the sales is the booking side. The sales is the side that works with Corey Day and Visit KC to bring in conventions and conferences. They travel. Our staff travels with Visit KC to help win business for Kansas City. So it's really important that we have a high level of customer service and satisfaction in the way of sales. Now, event services is on the opposite end. It's actually, those are the folks that are at the event making everything happen, making sure that the customer's requirements are met, making sure that the lights are on at the right time, at the right temperature, and believe it or not, there's some events that, we have contractual obligations to provide heating and cooling 24 hours a day, 7 days if they're there for 7 days. So, a week like this week, it's going to be 87 on Thursday and 67 on Friday, so it can become a challenge for our staff just to keep up with the weather sometimes. So, but they do a fabulous job, and our customer service scores are reflective of that. I'm very happy to announce that in fiscal year 2019, in the first quarter, we're sitting at a 4.8 and a 4.8 in both categories. So if I can get that to a 4.9, I'll be really happy, and we're going to have a little get-together and feed everybody, I think. So I just want to give a shout-out to our staff. They make it happen.
Nice
we have a fantastic team. We can't do it without them. We're there. My job is to support our team and provide them with all the resources they need to be successful and to meet our customers' expectations and exceed them when they can. So that's my constant mantra to them is tell me what you need that we need to provide you to make this a better experience for our customers and attendees. And they do a really good job about reaching out when there is a challenge. They know that we're there to support them and our clients. So I give all the credit to our staff. I really do. And that is all the slides that I have.
Nice work, Mike.
All right, strategy D, Santa Fe neighborhood.
Yes, the strategy really is looking at how we can best preserve our historic resources and make investments in them so that they benefit not only the owners of the property but the surrounding neighborhood. And that's what led us to somewhat of a deep dive into looking at the Santa Fe neighborhood, so 27th to Linwood, Prospect to Indiana. And really the focus there was to look at Property A, the Satchel Page residence that experienced a pretty devastating fire earlier this year. And so through city efforts and others, it's really focusing around what can be done to stabilize and rehabilitate that property, to make it a point of stability for the neighborhood, and really also potentially have it be a point of attraction for those folks that are interested in the history of baseball, history of Negro League. Satchel Paige, his family members are still in the community and of the community. So the idea was, when taking a look at that historic resource in a neighborhood full of wonderful historic resources, what could we do beyond just stabilizing that one property? And so it led us to work with Neighborhood and Housing Services and other departments to really take a look at a strategy for promoting visitation and understanding what we need to do from a streetscaping and a neighborhood improvement perspective. So the properties you see there are things that are some of the windshield surveys. The area has been previously surveyed. It is a designated historic district. But the idea was for us to go in and see what we could do from an infill perspective, what we could do in terms of providing some additional dollars to property owners to help them improve sites. But we really want to use this area somewhat as a pilot for other areas that have a high composition of historic structures, and see what we can really do to look at some tax credit opportunities and maybe creating some pools to be able to apply for tax credits, maybe through city intervention. We have our local historic trust corporation that holds historic facades. What can we maybe do to get some look at receiving funding in a block that we could distribute to multiple property owners that would help offset the cost of maintaining and preserving their properties? So we see this as a pilot. There are a lot of great things that are happening on Prospect Corridor. Prospect Max bus service will be coming next year. That's focused a lot of attention on infilling and rebuilding that particular neighborhood. So there'll be even more quality of life improvements for the community. So how can historic resources be used to help emphasize great character there and really help to strengthen neighborhoods? So again, we see this as a pilot. The Kansas City Design Center has worked with this neighborhood and Key Coalition as well to talk about infilling. And I'm happy to see that we're looking at strategies that may look at creating loan pools and other source of funds, multiple persons, to be able to provide some revolving dollars that will help for improvement projects and really help fill the gap that all neighborhoods are experiencing. The cost between what it is to rehabilitate a building or put up a new structure versus what capital is available for someone to acquire that property. So we're looking at a lot of different strategies. Open spaces is an open space exhibit within the community that's really wonderful as well. It's brought people to the community. So again, lots of attention. We want to make sure we have some tools that help stabilize the community, but also tools that allow long-term property owners within these communities to remain. And really to serve as kind of that welcoming point for additional residents within the community. And again, you're seeing really kind of the fire somewhat devastating from Satchel Paige perspective. Earlier this week, through efforts, it's kind of a consortium's getting built with Historic Kansas City, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, looking at what we can do in terms of identifying, getting dollars to help stabilize the structure, and then also look at reuse, and then look at the appropriate type of historic designations and historic highlights, so we could have people to come and take a look at the building and learn more about the neighborhood. Again, it's not just that home. You look at that home and the dollars we'll need to invest. It really is a broader community. The aerial shot there is showing the Linwood Shopping Center. We've made the improvements to the supermarket on the western side of the street. It's now contemplated what do we do to the eastern side of the street. This is my plug always to talk about the wonderful Arvest Bank building that is there that I think is it's a great model of early 20th century commercial development. So there are lots of gems in the area. How do we stitch everything together? And again, the most important thing is knowing that as we do this, we want to create some prototypes so we can take these strategies and deploy them to other communities.
Right. Good.
All right, that takes us to the end. Strategy F, the short-term rental ordinance, which was passed. So got a big completed check mark.
Thanks to all that worked on that and came together, and lots of community engagement. And we have rules in place. They are out there, so we're in a good place.
What is the ordinance number for that?
I do not know that off the top of my head. I can get that to you. But if you just even went into our system and Googled short-term rental, you'll find a page that gives, I think our FAQ page is still up about the rules and procedures.
And then, Rick, I think you had submitted some things that are sort of on the horizon that we're working on as far as the shared economy.
Oh, yeah, okay. And I just saw that AltCap is hosting a Get Into the Share Economy workshop tomorrow evening at PlexPod. So if folks are interested in that, look for that on the social media. I saw it on LinkedIn. But these sharing economy business models, even the scooters that just came into town, offer residents the ability to find contract work as chargers for these devices. The UMKC Law School has a law technology public policy course that we've participated in for a number of years with Uber and Lyft. They did this pre-policy research for us. They're working on pre-policy research right now related to Turo, a peer-to-peer car rental service. And during Tech Week, we have a what I'm calling an emerging technology disruptive business models workshop to talk about how these these sharing economy business models are coming into local government markets and sometimes easily entering the market through there's a company called Bungie that lets you rent your pickup truck and be like an Uber driver to haul people's stuff around. Didn't require really any local regulation changes. So that conversation will happen during Tech Week. We're presenting at the Smart City Advisory Board on Monday related to this topic and looking at expanding that conversation so that we have more community engagement.
Yeah, Rick, is there a comprehensive list at this point, or kind of an evolving list of those types, especially in the transportation realm, the different sharing economy apps and things that exist in Kansas City? I think I've had questions, or I've heard people talking about various things that they know have been deployed here or have not been. Is there someone keeping an updated list of that type of technology that's been deployed?
Well, I've been keeping track because I'm trying to find out who will be knocking at our door next, or who will be hopefully announcing by talking to us first. But that would be part of this project that we would be putting together. A lot of people have talked to me about the gig economy and how you can string together a fairly decent career as a ride-hailing driver for Uber or Lyft, a charger for either the scooter companies, using Airbnb or HomeAway to rent a room in your house or your whole house. So there are a number of ways to do this. The interesting one now is this Turo, where you rent your own car while you're not using it.
Second career, boss.
Julia,
it's a side hustle.
That's right.
Julia, I'm sorry, just to answer Andrea, your question, those ordinance numbers are 170771 and 170772.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to the end. As always, anyone who's watching this at a later time can always tweet at KCMO, #KCStat, to ask any questions. We also have information on the website of how to access these slide decks. So thanks, everybody.
Nice work. Appreciate it.
Thank you.